a command to Echo Tango 91. Last secure access to evidence vault registered at 3:17 hours. No personnel ID matched. Surveillance disabled from internal override. And here's the anomaly: the code entered matches Officer Marcus Reid's credentials. Problem is, Marcus Reid died 6 years ago. Proceed with extreme caution. This is Case 91T.
It started with a sound so subtle, it didn't register on the security audio logs. Just a soft hiss, like air escaping from something sealed for too long. The time was 3:17 a.m. The hallway outside the evidence vault was empty, its fluorescent lights flickering in slow intervals that created more shadows than clarity. The vault door, reinforced steel with biometric access, shifted open not with force, but with permission. The system didn't reject the entry. In fact, it logged it as valid. A 6-digit code was entered correctly on the first try. No alarms were tripped, no badge was swiped, and yet the red indicator on the keypad blinked once and turned green, as if welcoming someone it remembered. This room wasn't like the others. It held the kind of materials that didn't appear in press briefings, evidence sealed off from the world, too complicated or too dangerous to process. DNA vials from unsolved murders, weapons tied to internal investigations, photographs that never reached the chain of custody, and most of all, documents, thick, yellowing folders with missing page numbers and blacked out lines. When the routine morning inspection took place, nothing seemed out of place until the inventory check. Item Z17 was gone. It wasn't a weapon or a vial. It was a single black envelope, unmarked, tagged with a case number that hadn't been spoken aloud in over a decade, 91T. The security logs showed no error, no tampering, just a clean entry under the credentials of Officer Marcus Reid. The problem was Marcus Reid died in 2018, officially, but now his access code had come back to life, and someone had used it to open a room that wasn't supposed to open again. Detective Marla Vex arrived at the precinct an hour before sunrise, summoned not by protocol, but by a silent notification routed to her private line, a backup alert, created years ago for breaches that shouldn't be possible. She was no stranger to internal corruption or digital manipulation, but this was different. The security footage didn't show a person, it showed gaps, moments where the timestamp continued but the screen flickered black, as if the cameras themselves blinked. No shadows, no motion, just void. She cross-referenced the keypad access log, expecting to find a spoofed ID or administrative override. But what she found made her skin tighten. The code was genuine, and it wasn't guessed, it was known, entered without hesitation. The kind of precision only someone with first-hand clearance could have. But that clearance had been revoked, archived, and purged years ago with Marcus Reid's file. He had been declared killer during an undercover operation. No body, no funeral, just a folded flag and a quietly closed case. But Marla remembered him, not just the facts, the man. Obsessive, brilliant, and increasingly paranoid during his final months on the force. He'd spoken about systems within systems, about cases that weren't meant to be solved, about truths too heavy for the department to hold. Most had dismissed him, but Marla had never fully let go. When she walked into the vault and saw everything intact except for that envelope, she felt something twist in her gut. There was no sign of forced entry, no disturbed dust, no prints on the door. Just one anomaly, a single sticky note left behind on the inventory terminal. It read, in perfect cursive handwriting, "You locked away the truth. I came to free it." Signed with the initials MR. Marla stood still inside the vault, letting the silence press against her like a question waiting to be answered. The envelope marked Z17 had always been a quiet mystery, tucked deep into the corner of the vault's far cabinet, sealed with tape that had yellowed over time. She had asked about it once, years ago, and been told flatly that its contents were unclassified pending review, which was code for forget it exists. As she had, until now, with the envelope gone and a note from a man long thought dead. Every alarm in her body screamed that this wasn't just a breach, it was a message. She glanced again at the sticky note, the penmanship too precise to be rushed, as if whoever wrote it had all the time in the world. And perhaps they had. The vault smelled faintly of dust and metal, but there was another scent now, faint, familiar, unsettling. Burned ozone. The kind that sometimes lingered after a system overload or electromagnetic disturbance. She moved to the far corner of the room and opened the maintenance panel beneath the shelving. Inside, instead of wires and circuit boards, she found a small, folded photograph. It was old, slightly torn, with a timestamp from 2003. The image showed a group of officers standing in front of the old precinct headquarters, smiling. All except one. The man on the far left wasn't smiling. He was staring at the camera, eyes fixed, posture stiff, and in bold red pen, a circle had been drawn around him. Underneath it, 2 words had been scribbled. He remembers. Marla turned the photo over. There was nothing else, just the heavy weight of the moment, as if something that had been buried was now slowly, deliberately clawing its way back. The precinct's archive system was never designed for secrets, not real ones. It was built for organization, for chain of custody reports and cross-referenced case numbers. But what Marla was now looking for didn't appear in any official catalog. She sat alone in her office, surrounded by dim fluorescent light and the soft hum of outdated servers. The case number 91T wasn't just missing. It had been scrubbed, not deleted. Erased, like it had never been entered. She tried alternate spellings, looked through backup drives, even accessed the pre-2010 cold storage tapes. Still nothing. It was as if case 91T had only existed in memory, and that made it worse. Because memories fade, but files don't. Just vanish, especially not ones tied to secure vault inventory. Her eyes scanned across an old personnel directory, and there it was again, Marcus Reid's name. Faint, flickering, briefly visible before being overwritten by a blinking ERROR. 404, she leaned in closer, adjusted the filter, and paused the screen just before it glitched out again. It wasn't just his name, there was a note field. A single phrase remained in gray font. See Orchard Annex. File 07B. Marla froze. That location hadn't been used in over a decade, a forgotten extension of the department's old evidence processing center, now condemned due to structural decay. But she remembered it. It was where low priority, unsolved, and internally conflicted cases went to die. The place no one dared visit without a superior's written order. And Marcus Reid? He used to go there after hours, always alone, always, carrying a folder under his arm. Marla had seen it once. She had asked what he was working on. He didn't answer. He just said, "There's something down there the system doesn't want us to find." Marla drove across town without backup, without clearance, and without telling anyone where she was going. The Orchard Annex had been decommissioned 9 years ago after a partial roof collapse, and a rat infestation made it uninhabitable. But standing outside its rusted chain-link fence now, it didn't look abandoned. It looked undisturbed, like something had chosen not to rot. The metal lock on the gate had been recently replaced. The hinges didn't squeal when she pushed them open. Inside, the floor was dusty but swept, and the lights, most of them, still worked. That's what hit her first. Electricity. The power should have been cut years ago. She moved slowly through the narrow aisles of storage shelves, each one labeled in faded marker, unsolved, pending internal, reassigned. The silence inside was heavier than she remembered, like the air itself had weight. She found 07B tucked behind a collapsed filing cabinet, its label barely hanging on. The drawer stuck, resisting her pull like it had something to protect. When it finally opened, she didn't find a folder. She found a box. Inside were photographs, hand-drawn diagrams, and slips of paper, all centered around one thing, the precinct itself. Different floors, different years, different anomalies. Some were photos of the same hallway taken years apart, with minor differences, a door that no longer existed, a clock with no hands, a nameplate that read officer R. Marks, close, but not quite Reid. It felt like someone had been watching the building not from the inside, but from outside time. A handwritten note rested on top, yellowed and creased. If this box is open, the lock is broken. And if the lock is broken, the past is loose. You cannot bury something that remembers being real. She sat down on the cold concrete floor, the open box between her knees, her breath fogging in the strange chill that settled inside the annex. Every document she pulled out added a layer to something vast and deliberate, like someone had been cataloging distortions in reality itself. There were photos of officers who'd never existed, reports with timestamps that didn't match official timelines, even printed memos from computers that had been destroyed before the dates on the page. Then she found something personal, a torn page from a psychiatric evaluation, labeled only with initials. MR. The text was fragmented, but one line had been underlined 3 times. Patient expresses belief that precinct structure has repeating architecture not mapped by blueprints. Marla blinked. She'd heard whispers over the years, stories from rookies who got lost on their first patrol inside the building, claiming they ended up on floors that didn't exist. Veterans who laughed it off, but never quite looked her in the eyes when they did. She looked back down at the page. Someone had scrawled across the bottom in red ink, "It's not just the building that repeats, it's the case." A deep hum began to build in the walls around her, not mechanical, not electrical. It was low, like pressure rising from the foundation. She stuffed the documents back into the box, grabbed her phone to snap photos, but the screen glitched and rebooted. A single message flashed before the restart. "Access denied. Wrong timeline." The lights flickered. She stood, the box in her arms, and backed toward the exit. Something was watching her now, not with eyes, but with memory. The kind of memory that doesn't fade, only waits to be noticed again. And Marla had just looked too close. Back in her car, Marla didn't drive straight to the precinct. She parked for blocks away in a grocery store lot, engine off, hands still trembling around the steering wheel. Her phone refused to restart. Black screen, occasional flicker, but nothing stable. Whatever system had rejected her earlier had done more than block access. It had touched her device like it knew how to break it, not through malware, but through something deeper. She pulled the box onto the passenger seat, heart still thudding as if it hadn't slowed since the moment she'd opened drawer 07B. Every instinct told her this wasn't just about a rogue ex-officer. It wasn't even about Reid anymore. It was about the case, Case 91T, and whatever truth had been buried with it. She opened the glove compartment and pulled out an old burner phone she kept from her days in undercover ops. No GPS, no apps, just calls and texts. She typed a single message to a contact listed only as G. "You were right. 91T was real. Someone's moving through time-stamped blind spots. Vault breached. Evidence gone." She hit send. The message didn't show up as delivered, just vanished. She leaned back, eyes scanning the side mirrors. That's when she noticed it. The same dark sedan parked across from the store's delivery ramp. Tinted windows, no plates, no movement, but the kind of presence you feel more than see. Her fingers hovered over the burner again, but something made her stop. She looked at the box beside her. One of the photos had slid loose. It was a photo of her from behind, in the hallway outside the vault. Timestamp 3:16 a.m., 1 minute before the breach, and the note beside it, scribbled in the corner, "She follows patterns. We watched her learn." Marla didn't go home. She drove to the oldest public library in the city, a place with no cameras, no digital check-in, and barely enough funding to keep the lights on. She chose a corner table beneath a flickering lamp and emptied the contents of the box across its surface. Her fingers moved quickly now, searching not for answers, but for patterns. And they were everywhere. Shift schedules that never existed. Badge numbers assigned to officers who died before their first day. Maintenance reports on security systems dated years before they were installed. One image showed the evidence vault door, slightly ajar, in 2007. But the vault wasn't built until 2009. Another photo had a timestamp for 1994, but depicted a hallway lined with LED lights that weren't invented yet. It was like reality had been rewritten in layers, and someone had captured each draft. Then she found it, a photocopy of a file folder marked with her own name, Vex M. It looked authentic, but the header was wrong. It listed her badge number, her division, but the precinct number wasn't 4, It was 6, a precinct that, according to every department record, had been decommissioned in 2001, and yet, the timestamp on the file read, updated, August 3, 2025 to 4:12 a.m. That date was still 2 weeks away. Marla's pulse spiked. This wasn't a glitch. Someone had written her into a version of the department that didn't exist yet. Her role, her memory, her movements, they were being tracked in a future she hadn't lived. She sat frozen as the final slip of paper caught her eye, a map of the precinct, with one hallway highlighted in red, not one she recognized. Next to it, one line was scrawled in thick black ink. She never left. She just hasn't arrived yet. She stuffed the papers back into the box and walked quickly out of the library, feeling as if the air around her had shifted, like she had crossed into a version of the city that looked the same, but wasn't. The cars, the buildings, the people, everything felt slightly delayed. A child on the corner looked up from his toy and stared at her without blinking. A man sweeping the sidewalk moved in slow, repetitive arcs, like a looped video. Marla shook her head, trying to reset her focus. She climbed back into her car, heart racing, and turned the ignition. Nothing. Dead. Battery full. Lights responsive, but the engine refused to start. Her phone buzzed. Not the burner, her broken phone. The screen lit up for the first time since the annex, but there were no icons, no signal bars, just a black screen with white text, "Stop looking." Then the message vanished, and the phone powered off again. She gripped the steering wheel, willing her mind to stay anchored. Someone, or something, didn't want her to reach the next clue. She opened the glove compartment and took out a flashlight, then grabbed the box. If she couldn't move forward digitally, she'd go analog. She pulled the highlighted precinct map from the box again and stared at the red hallway. It was drawn behind the current evidence room, a space that, according to blueprints, didn't exist, but she remembered something. Years ago, during a temporary shutdown, construction workers had complained about misaligned foundations in that exact wing. She dismissed it then. Now, it felt like a breadcrumb, and below the map, scribbled in pencil, barely visible, the vault was never the secret. The hallway behind it is, and beside that, for the first time, coordinates. The precinct felt colder that night. Marla waited until after hours, slipped through the rear entrance using an old maintenance code, and made her way down to the evidence floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above her, casting an artificial glow that made every corner feel sharper. She passed the vault slowly, hand brushing the wall beside it. The plaster was uneven. It had always been uneven, but no one ever questioned it. Just a result of poor patchwork, they'd said. But now, she pressed her palm against the surface and felt something that shouldn't be there, a hollow vibration. Not the dull knock of drywall, but something deeper, like a faint hum resonating beneath concrete. She checked the map again. The red-marked hallway extended exactly 22 feet beyond the vault's rear wall. But that area, according to all blueprints, had no door, no room, no wiring. Marla retrieved a pocket knife from her belt and carefully scraped along the edge of the wall. The blade caught on something, not brick or steel, but metal plating beneath a thin surface layer. A false wall. She exhaled slowly, realizing the implications. Someone had built a passage and hidden it. In plain sight. Not recently, not sloppily, but intentionally, and long ago. She glanced over her shoulder. The silence in the room felt to complete now. No creaking pipes, no distant typing from upstairs. Just stillness. She pulled a small crowbar from her bag and dug into the seam where the metal edge protruded. With a painful creak, a square panel broke loose. Behind it, darkness, a tunnel. Unmarked, narrow, just wide enough for a single person. She aimed her flashlight inside. The beam disappeared into black. On the threshold, etched into the frame, were words scratched by hand. She returns by choice, but leaves remembered. The tunnel was colder than she expected, not just physically, but conceptually. Like the temperature dropped more with each step, not because of airflow, but because of proximity to something forgotten. The walls were smooth, metallic, and unmarked by time, as if immune to rust or dust. No cobwebs, no debris, just a narrow corridor that seemed to exist outside the building's logic. Marla kept her flashlight steady, each footstep echoing louder than it should. After 20 paces, the passage turned sharply left, revealing a sealed metal door with no handle. At eye level, a fingerprint scanner blinked red. She froze. The design was ancient, 2000s-era tech, but it was powered. She placed her finger on the scanner out of instinct. It buzzed, flashed green, and the door slid open silently. Behind it, another hallway, shorter, ending at what looked like an old interrogation room. She stepped inside. The walls were lined with photographs, her own case files, surveillance shots of her entering rooms alone, timestamps she didn't remember experiencing. On the far wall, there was a mirror, but when she looked into it, the reflection didn't move with her. It lagged. Just a second too slow. She stepped left. Her image followed late. She whispered, "What is this?" And the reflection answered a different phrase entirely. She was warned. Marla stumbled back, heart racing. She turned toward the only door out, now sealed behind her. Her flashlight flickered. The mirror pulsed once like a screen. Then, the lights shut off entirely. In the pitch-black silence, a projector behind the mirror began to hum. A reel clicked on. A voice, recorded decades ago, played through hidden speakers. Case 91T was closed due to interference. She should not have entered, but she always does. And then, faintly, laughter. Her own voice, but younger. Marla stood frozen, breathing shallowly as the room began to shift, not physically, but perceptually. The walls felt closer now. The mirror pulsed again, and this time, it showed a different version of the room. Same layout, same desk, but older, dustier. On the floor of the projection, a body lay still, face down, wearing her jacket. The timestamp on the lower corner of the mirrored screen read, August 3rd, 2025 to 4:12 a.m. the exact date on the file she had found. She reached out toward the image, and the mirror rippled like water, distorting her reflection. Her fingers met cold glass, but the surface gave slightly, like a membrane. She yanked her hand back, heart thudding. Something had stitched her into this story without her consent. Or maybe she had already consented in a version of events she hadn't lived yet. Behind her, the voice returned, not from the speakers this time, from the room itself. Low, familiar. "You came early this time," it said. "That's new." She turned slowly, no one there. But the air vibrated with presence. Files scattered across the desk, all stamped with her name. But the dates on them, they stretched back decades, even centuries. Some had dates written in styles no longer used. One was marked Vex and Cycle 6. Another simply Reid, iteration, drift. She grabbed one and opened it. Inside were detailed records of her past decisions and future ones. Choices she hadn't made yet. Conversations she hadn't had. Photos of people she hadn't met. In the final page of the folder, written in red across her own portrait, were 3 words, "Anchor has slipped." Then the lights surged back. The mirror went black. And somewhere, behind the walls, the hallway began to open again. The hallway behind the mirror wasn't the same tunnel she had entered. This one was warmer, but not in a comforting way. It felt lived in, like breath and time had passed through it again and again. The walls were papered with overlapping pages, tacked up like a madman's collage. Police reports, security memos, psychiatric evaluations, even fragments of classified government transcripts, all referencing a case number that repeated like a chant, 91T. But more disturbing than the documents were the photos. Dozens of them, hundreds, all of Marla, in different lighting, different decades. Her hair sometimes shorter, sometimes gray. In some, she was smiling. In others, bruised. And in one, she wasn't alone. A blurred figure stood behind her, always behind, never clear. Her stomach turned. She stepped closer and reached for a file dated 1978. Her name was printed in typewriter font, followed by the words, "Subject remains unaware of recursive function. Memory reset incomplete. Observation ongoing." Her hands trembled. This wasn't an investigation. This was containment. A loop. She was the anomaly. Her reality, curated, altered, rewritten over and over again, just as Reid had warned. Not just secrets hidden in the vault, but an entire identity smothered. In order to preserve whatever Protocol 91T represented, Marla pressed, her hands against the wall, the pages crinkling under her fingers. Her head throbbed. Memories she couldn't place, smells, voices, colors from dreams she never remembered, rushed in like static. A voice whispered behind her ear, "This is where you remember that you were the key." She spun around. The hallway was empty, only the photos stared back, and deep down, behind all logic, a truth she could no longer unsee surfaced like rot. Through old wood, she had never left this place. She'd only forgotten she had arrived. Marla walked deeper into the corridor, no longer trying to map direction. Time itself had softened here, clocks meant nothing, and footsteps echoed, both ahead and behind her. The passage opened into a chamber lined with filing cabinets too tall to be practical, stretching up into shadows she couldn't see the end of. Each drawer bore a name. Some she recognized, others she didn't, but each one carried a pattern. A single red line drawn diagonally across the label, and a case number following it. Every drawer said 91T. She reached for one labeled Vex. Marla, Containment Draft 3, hesitated, then pulled. The drawer extended with impossible depth, sliding out for nearly 6 feet before stopping. Inside was a VHS tape, unmarked, and a small cassette recorder already loaded with a tape. A note was taped to the lid. "Press play only if you're ready to forget again." Her hand hovered. This wasn't just memory storage. This was memory replacement. Marla backed away slowly, breath shallow, until her shoulder bumped into something solid. She turned. A mirror stood there, freestanding, old with frayed wooden edges. But this one reflected the room clearly, and in the reflection, she saw herself holding the VHS tape she hadn't touched. Saw a bleeding cut across her cheek that didn't exist. Saw something move just out of frame behind her. She spun around. Nothing. She turned. Back. The mirror now showed the vault, not the room she stood in, the evidence vault. She reached forward again. The surface of the glass rippled like water. Her hand passed through, and a second later, so did she. Lights flickered. The sound of metal slamming echoed all around her, and then a silence. The vault was closed. From the inside, the surveillance feed from the evidence vault came back online at 12 a.m. sharp. Everything appeared normal. The shelves untouched, the lights steady, no signs of forced entry, no motion detected. The system log showed no recent access. Case 91T remained listed as sealed, no changes, no anomalies. But deep inside the hard drive, buried under encryption layers designed to erase themselves, one new frame had been added. A single image, frame number 91417. It showed Marla Vex, standing alone in the center of the vault, looking up at the camera. Her expression unreadable, her eyes hollow. But the strangest part wasn't her presence. It was the timestamp, August 3rd, 2025 to 12 a.m. the future. A date that hadn't arrived yet, and yet, it was already logged. A technician on the morning shift spotted the image by accident, tried to report it, and was later found sitting alone in his car, with the engine running, mumbling something about ghost loops and walls that breathe. The official report marked it down as stress-related hallucination. But in the weeks that followed, strange things began happening. Lights flickering only in the vault wing, sounds recorded with no source, doors opening to hallways that weren't on the blueprints, and every few nights, the vault's keypad would light up at exactly 3:17 a.m., waiting for a code no one had given it. And on one of those nights, weeks later, a new note appeared taped to the inside of the door. No cameras caught it being placed. It read, in the same perfect cursive, "You locked away the truth. I came to free it." Below it, two initials. Not MR this time, but MV, and this time, the vault stayed open.